Okay, we're still doing 6.3. This is day 3. This is supposed to be Monday today. Well, I'm making this in the morning. Hopefully you're going to watch it while you're at home today. So if you know one trig function and you know the quadrant, you should be able to tell me the values of all the other trig functions. Okay, so when I do this, remember the trig functions are sine, cosine, tangent, and then the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, the reciprocal of cosine is secant, and the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent. Okay, so I put those next to each other. So if I know the cosine of an angle is -4/5, I know right away without any thinking the secant, because the secant's going to be the reciprocal, which is -5/4. Okay, so I got one out of the way. Now, it's in quadrant 2. So in quadrant 2, I know that cosine is negative. I know that sine is positive. That's the only positive one in quadrant 2. All right, so what am I going to do? Well, this is what I do, and Mrs. Burr said this is what she did also. This triangle is not to scale. All right, so the cosine, which is adjacent over hypotenuse, is 4/5. So in order to find these other things, I'm going to need to find this other side. So x squared plus 4 squared equals 5 squared. X squared plus 16 equals 25. Subtract 16, x squared equals 9, so x equals 3. Okay, so from this triangle, I can find the fractions. So I know that the sine of theta, opposite over hypotenuse, is 3/5. Oh, but it's going to be it's going to be positive because it's in quadrant 2. Lucky me. Then the cosecant, which is the reciprocal of that, is also positive, so it's 5/3. And then tangent is going to be negative, and it's opposite over adjacent, TOA, so that's 3/4. And then cotangent is the reciprocal of this, so it's -4/3. So those are my other 5 function values. Over here, and this one up here. The quadrant tells me the SIGN, whether it's positive or negative. All right, let's try the next. So we're going to do a bunch of that. But first, if I need to find 135 is a special angle. Remember last week we talked about 30, 45, and 60 and how you were supposed to know those values. Well, 135 is a friend of one of those angles. And because it ends in a 5, you're probably guessing 45. Okay, so remember 135, it's more than 90, but it's less than 180. So 135 is going to be over here. Now, when I find the reference angles, I always use the x-axis. Always use the x-axis. How far from the x-axis am I? So we're going to take, in quadrant 2, we're going to take 180 minus the angle. And that's going to give us 45. 150, I start over here, and it's more than 90 and less than 180. So this is 150, which means this is the reference angle, and 180 minus 150 is 30. Okay, so that means that when I find the sine of 150, really I can find the sine of 30, and it's the same. And remember, the sine of 30 is a half. The only thing I have to be careful is whether it's positive or negative. My calculator's not all that helpful in these problems, by the way. And then 120 is also between, because it's in the second quadrant, this is 120, so what is 180 minus 120 but 60? So whenever I do 120, I'm going to use 60 degrees as my reference angle. So in other words, if I ask you what is the cosine of 120, and I want an exact value, I have to say, oh, well, 120 is in the second quadrant, so it's negative. The reference angle is 60. What's the cosine of 60? The cosine of 60 is 1/2, So it's negative 1/2. Okay, how do I find reference angles in quadrant 3? Remember, we always use the x-axis. So this time it's how far past the x-axis am I? How far is this? So I'm going to take 225 and subtract 180, and surprise, surprise, it's 45. Anytime you end in a 5, it's going to be 45 for these first ones. All right, 240 is in the third quadrant, because all of these are. So how far past 180 did I get? So what is 240 minus 180? But 60. So the reference angle is 60. Now, what about this crazy negative 120? Well, negative 120 is here, right? Negative 90, negative 180. Okay, again, how far? I want to always use the x-axis. So how far am I from the x-axis? Well, I can say 180 minus 120, and that's going to be 60. So it's 60 degrees from the x-axis, so the reference angle is 60. 210, same way. It's over here, past 180. How far am I from the x-axis? I always use the x-axis. So 210 minus 180 is 30. Okay, and then for the fourth quadrant, again, I'm going to use my x-axis. 300 is over here. Okay, how far am I from the x-axis? How far is this? So this is 360 minus 300. So that's 60 degrees is my reference angle. Okay, 315, I'm guessing you can probably figure that out by now. It's going to be 45, but 315 is over here somewhere. Notice these are not to scale. So the reference angle is this one. So what is 360 minus 315? And it's 45. And 330 is the same. We're going to go around, right? How far from the x-axis am I? Notice almost all of these pictures look exactly the same. 360 minus 330 is 30 degrees. So my reference angle is 30 degrees. Okay, so how does that help us? Well, you have this awesome picture here, okay? And so the question is, what are the trig values for the angle shown, okay? So it's in quadrant 4. Quadrant 4. That's a terrible 4, by the way. Let me try again. Quadrant 4. Okay, so I know that my cosine is positive, but everything else is not, because cosine is the x. So x is positive in quadrant 4. All right, so how long is this purple line that I just drew here? Well, I look at these coordinates, and it's the x coordinate because this is the x-axis. So this is the square root of 7. And then I say to myself, how long is this part? And well, that's the y. And I'm just going to call that 3. I know that it's negative, but I don't really care that it's negative anymore because I know what quadrants it's in, and that's all I really care about. So this is radical 7, this is 3, this is going to be my angle theta. I don't really care what the value of theta is, I just have to be able to find the trig functions of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is find my hypotenuse. So c squared is equal to 3 squared plus radical 7 squared. Radical 7 squared is 7. 7 plus 9 is 16. So c squared is 16, so c equals 4. All right. Now I just have to use my, regular sine, cosine, tangent stuff. So the sine of theta, opposite over hypotenuse, is going to be 3 over 4, but since it's in quadrant 4, it's got to be negative. Then the reciprocal of sine is cosecant, so that's going to be negative 4 over 3. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's the square root of 7 over 4, and it's the only positive one. So when I do secant, that's going to be 4 over radical 7, but I'm not allowed to have a radical 7 in the denominator, so that's going to be 4 radical 7 over 7. And then tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent, opposite over adjacent. which is 3 over radical 7, when I can't have a radical 7 in the bottom. So that's going to be 3 radical 7 over 7. And then cotangent is the reciprocal. Oh, it's negative, by the way. Sorry, my bad. Negative. Sometimes my brain is like crazy. So I'm going to flip, but I'm going to flip the first one. So radical 7 over 3. Okay? All right, I got another one down here. Okay, so here's beta. All right, so remember we always worry about this angle right here. This is the angle that we care about. Okay, so that's going to be my theta. I'm going to draw, let me get that a little bit smaller. This is my theta, because that's, I always measure with the x-axis. So this side and this side are the important sides. So I'm going to redraw that over here just to get it out of the way of that picture. This is theta, just like the picture. Now, if the x-coordinate is -2, that means this is -2. So I'm just going to write 2 here. 11 is the y-coordinate, so this side is 11. So 11 is over here. It's in quadrant 2, which means that the only thing positive is sine. Sine is positive. All students take chemistry. So sine is positive. Let's find the hypotenuse. C squared equals 11 squared plus 2 squared. 121 plus 4 makes 125. Oh, 125 divided by 25 is 5c. So squared. So c is equal to the square root of 125, and that can be simplified to 25 times 5, which makes it 5 radical 5. So this side is 5 radical 5. Okay, so let's find sine. Sine is positive. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's going to be 11 over 5 radical 5. Well, I can't have a radical 5 in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by radical 5, which gives me 11 radical 5 over, this is 5. These two together make 5. 5 times 5 makes 25. And then the reciprocal of sine is cosecant. And I'm going to go back to the original here, this part right here. And I'm going to flip that, and it's going to be 5 radical 5 over 11. And it's also positive because sine was positive. All right, so cosine theta is adjacent, which is 2 over hypotenuse, which is 5 radical 5. Before I simplify that, maybe I want to do the secant. Oh, and it's negative. Negative 5 radical 5 over 2. This one I have to multiply by 5 radical 5, radical 5 over radical 5. I feel like I'm rambling. 2 radical 5 over, again, 25. And then tangent, thankfully, has no radicals. This is going to be negative because we're in quadrant 2. Opposite over adjacent, 11 over 2, which means that the cotangent is -2 over 11. Okay, I think that's it.